Good morning, fellow humanists. My name is Todd Kimball. It's an honor to be your MC today. It's going to be a fun meeting as we remember the 50 years of HGP with many stories from our dignitaries and our audience. And I thought I would get you started with a story about my mini journey to humanism. Although I've been an official member for 18 years or so, as a child, I was a humanist. And I want to tell you this story that I think will illustrate that. It's an understatement to say that I was not particularly close to my mom's mother. Now, some people would say, isn't that grandma? And I would say, not in this case. The relation stopped with my mom. And I did not like my mom's mother. She did not like me from a very young age when I was 3 or 4 and I was in my cute little Everest and Jennings brown manual wheelchair. It was brown because that was the only color they would sell it in. And she would say to me when my mom wasn't around, "You're a burden to your mother. You're a burden to your mother. Get up and walk, get up and walk." And I was too young to really insult her with the proper enthusiasm, but she did not leave her insults only to me. One time when my dad was sitting at the breakfast table, she said to him, when I was there, but my mom wasn't, she said, I wish my daughter would have married Richard, another guy that she dated before my dad. So she was an equal opportunity insulter. But I feel like I got even when I was about 15. And I knew that this was going to be the last time that I saw her. She was in failing health. She was in and out of consciousness. And she was sitting on the couch reading the Bible. And I said, cramming for finals? And she didn't say anything. And I said, I think it's too late. You should have been nicer to people. So that was my youthful journey to humanism. And with that, I will read the official definition because I was not kind enough, nor did I have the true philosophy of humanism. I was just a sarcastic kid who grew into a sarcastic adult. But humanism is a rational philosophy informed by science, inspired by art, and motivated by compassion. It advocates the extension of participatory democracy and the expansion of an open society standing for human rights and social justice. And it is very fitting that our reader today is Mr. Dave Pebworth.
Thank you. I understand that the beginning of the Humanists of the Greater Portland started with the late Jerry Gage giving a program on Mark Twain. And so this morning I decided I would read some quotes by Mark Twain. I will begin. Also, I cannot reproduce Mark Twain's gruff voice, so I will do you the courtesy of not trying. Strange, a God who mouths golden rules and forgiveness, then invented hell, who mouths morals to other people and has none himself, who frowns on crimes yet commits them all, who created man without invitation, then tries to shuffle the responsibility for man's acts on man instead of placing where it belongs, upon himself. And finally, with altogether divine obtuseness, invites this poor, abused slave to worship him. Man is a religious animal. He is the only religious animal. He is the only animal that has the true religion, several of them. He is the only animal that loves his neighbor as himself and cuts his throat if his theology isn't straight. He has made a graveyard of the globe in trying his honest best to smooth his brother's path to happiness and heaven. The higher animals have no religion, and we are told they are going to be left out in the hereafter. I wonder why. It seems questionable taste. You believe in a book that has talking animals, wizards, witches, demons, sticks turning into snakes, burning bushes, food falling from the sky, people walking on water, and all sorts of magical, absurd, and primitive stories. And you say that we are the ones who need help? It ain't those parts of the Bible I can't understand that bother me. It is the parts that I do understand that bother me. I do not fear death. I I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was born and had not suffered the slightest inconvenience from it. The Bible, it is full of interest. It has noble poetry in it and some clever fables and some blood-drenched history and some good morals and a wealth of obscenity and upwards of 1,000 lies. Faith is believing what you know ain't so. The two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. Good decisions come from experience. Experience comes from making bad decisions. It is curious that physical courage should be so common in the world and moral courage so rare. The man who does not read has no advantage over the man who cannot read. The more I learn about people, the more I like my dog. Goes by favor. If it went by merit, you would stay out and your dog would go in. Mark Twain, 1835 to 1910.
Thank you, Dave. A beautiful reading, very timely this morning as we celebrate our 50 years as a group and get ready for our 50th anniversary celebration. And to kick us off in that endeavor, I introduce our president, Mr. Dave DiNucci.
I'm trying to present here a history of our group, and I've only been around since, I thought I'd been around since about 2000, but now upon researching the history, I'm now convinced I've been here since about 2002 or so. And I have found in preparing this talk, many people have been around way, way longer than I have, and many of them are here in the room right now. And they're going to know far more about what I'm saying than I do. This presentation was very hurriedly prepared, and it will hopefully be augmented by other people as time goes on, but maybe it'll be a good start. I'll at least say that. Also, it was intended to be a presentation of our history from the beginnings to now, and I just simply ran out of time. So fortunately, many of you have been around for the last 10 years or so, so you already know what the last 10 years or so are like, but they definitely deserve documentation that I did not have time to do here. So most of this talk is presented from the primary source, definitely, is history that Robert Sanford put onto the website. You can find it if you log into the website as a member and go under members information. There's a tab that says history. And but Robert's approach was to do what I'm sure many other people would do, and that is to just get a topic and write what the history on that topic, and then go to the next topic and write history on that topic. And I was hoping to kind of give the history from beginning to end. So it meant taking all that stuff and reordering it into a timeline order. And so that's primarily what my job was here, was taking Robert's document, putting it into timeline order. I'm sure I made mistakes in picking up Robert's words and putting them onto the chart. And I'm sure that Robert had, didn't hear everybody's words exactly correctly as he was making the history. And who knows if there are other jumbles there. So please don't be offended if some of this seems wrong to you, because I'm sure a lot of it will be wrong. So hopefully this will kind of goad you into kind of helping us to create the history. One part of the history was I noticed that in 2008, we created a history committee to come up with a history. And I think Robert put his history on the website around 2015. And so there's not much since that time. So, there are going to be gaps here and all kinds of stuff, but I just want to give the flavor. So this says 20 to 2023. That's not true. It's more like 2010. You'll see. Here's the main guy who started it all. His name is Lester Kirkendall. I didn't know too much about him. So that's one part of the history I wanted to learn a little bit about. Here's the original incorporation papers for HGP. And as you can see, it's stamped May 23rd, 1973 at the top, which is why that's the date that we're using as our 50th anniversary. There are only 4 people listed on this. There's Lester, there's Lois Lauber and somebody else, and then the agent is somebody else. And you won't see those other names anywhere from now on. So it's almost like he just found some people so that he could get the form filed. And you'll notice that all of them have Portland addresses at the bottom, except for Steve Anderson, who is the agent who's in Salem, Oregon. And it's registered in Salem, and it's not called HGP back then. It's called the Humanist Association of the Willamette Valley.
Excuse me, Lester Kirkendall. Do you all know that Lester Kirkendall became quite important in the whole humanist movement?
So we will get into some of that, but we'll definitely want more of that by the end. And by the way, I'm going to have to really zip through these slides. The way we're going to try to work this is I'm going to try to get through these slides as quickly as possible. And we have lots of information sitting right here in this room and right here on Zoom by people who were involved. So here is the chapter charter for the American Humanist Association. You will notice this is 10 years after the incorporation document, and you will notice a few familiar names on here. The very first one being Del Allen at the top. Down a bit is Pat Burnett. There's Herb Dirksen, who's still with us. And down in the third column there is Lester Kirkendall. And then there are probably some other names that some of you will recognize here, but I don't. But that's the thing I wanted to mention, is that Del and Pat Burnett and Herb Dirksen were around even since this time. So now I'll actually start with the slides that I started trying to put. It starts out May 23rd, 78 is when we were incorporated, or that should say 73. Is when the Barquettes moved to Portland about in the late 70s or so, one at a time. Kirkendall was a sexologist. That was his main thing. He was a professor at Oregon State University for many years. And after he formed the group, he was still winning awards. So he was awarded by the World Association for Sexology at Mexico City for starting a group. And then he got a teaching award from OSU, even though he was pretty much finished. And so I have very little information about what was going on here during that time. And yes, sexology. He was like the sex guy, sex expert in the nation, and he traveled all over the place and internationally. He was internationally known for that. And so some people here are definitely going to be able to fill in this slide more. And you'll notice I put 2 full decades on this slide because I have so little information about what was going on. That will not be true on the other slides. In 1983, when that other document that I showed you, which had us be an official AHA chapter, we became renamed right at the very same time to be the Humanists of the Portland, Vancouver metro area. And because all of our activity was actually up here. And then bylaws were formed, and those were signed by Pat Burnett, as well as Kirkendall and Rosemary Held. So they were our 3 directors at that time. And then very shortly after, Kirkendall was named the AHA Humanist of the Year in 1983. And he kind of stands out on the Humanist of the Year list because most people don't recognize him. And he thinks it was a mistake. He thinks AHA didn't know what they were doing in an interview that he gave later. But he did do a lot of stuff. Just this morning, I found more documentation of stuff he was doing with CFI, for example, and publishing stuff about humanism and sex and humanism and all that kind of stuff. So what else was going on? In about 1991, we published our first newsletter, and I'm going to guess that Pete was involved in that, but I'm not sure at that time. And Kirkendall died in 1987. I mean, in 1991 at the age of 87. So his period, this was his period, and Pat Burnett was working with him, and a few others of us were kind of involved, but I know very little bit about where we were meeting, what we were doing, so other people can fill that in after I'm done. And then in 92, the American Humanist Association held their conference here in Portland. And our group, which was HPVMA, Humanists of Portland, Vancouver Metro Area, helped out, and we helped do various things with them. And I will have some pictures right after these slides about us being involved in that conference. So around 1993, Pat Burnett said to Warren and Dorothy Fay that maybe they should start having some monthly meetings at their house, and they would find excuses to talk about humanism. They would do a presentation of a video of some kind, or they'd read something from the Humanist Manifesto or something, and it would start a discussion. So, and I might have some of this timeline mixed up about exactly when they started and when we started doing some other movement. So again, we'll get some clarification. There was some documentation that we actually performed, that we actually marched in the Pride Parade in 93, and I don't know, but that would be consistent with some other things that are happening. There was a summer solstice picnic at Gabriel Park in 93. We invited the Humanist Association of Salem. Warren Fay became ill over time, and I don't have the exact time, but Dorothy Fay is documented as saying that she found the group very supportive during that time, and that we transitioned about that time to meeting in other places, such as Unitarian churches, senior living facilities, and the attempt, because the name was the Portland, Vancouver area, there was an attempt to specifically meet 1 month in Portland, another month in Vancouver, another month in Portland. And there were only about 12 people attending around that time. By the way, on these slides, what I've tried to do is just under the timeline, I put the year, who was president at the time, as near as I can figure. And then if there are numbers down there, it'll be how many attendees or how many members we had. So there were about 12 people attending back in those days. And then on the very bottom, it's like where we were meeting. So the idea was we were meeting at the Fays early on, and then we were kind of alternating to Portland and Vancouver. Okay, in June 97, well, first, a men's lunch started in about 96, which met various places, eventually at Friar Tuck's, apparently. And women's brunches started in 97 at Carolyn Tomei's. And in 97, Pete opened Vinny's Pizza, which ended up being a very central location to the development of our group. So yeah, that was extremely important in many ways. And in September, or maybe December of 97, our name officially changed to Humanists of Greater Portland. Jerry Gage, Dick Mace was our president in 93. Pete Barquette, I think, was 94, 95. I'm still not exactly sure. And Mary Gage was our president in 96, and then Jerry Gage in 97. And 98, probably. Spring 98, Del Allen, Jerry Gage, and Fred Mosher meet to determine what we should be doing. And they decided on having weekly meetings on Sunday. And there's some documentation that Del might have also started either funding or thinking about a scholarship fund. And I see Del nodding, so I'll take that to be true. In April 5th, 1998 was our first weekly Sunday meeting. So we've been meeting weekly since then. Discussion and presentations were from members around humanism, secularism, church-state separation, etc. Dick Mace would often interview people about how they came to humanism. and Robert Sanford became the official MC in some sense by the summertime in that year. And there were humanist organizations in the area that were working together to kind of have presentations. So we worked together with the U.S. Atheists. Some people might not remember U.S. Atheists. They were located down on Foster, south of Powell. Well, Foster is south of Powell, but further down Foster. And they had their own office, which we were always very jealous of, that they had their own building. But I attended a few meetings there, and they were very atheistic. It wasn't a humanist organization. Corvallis Secular Society and Humanists of Salem. So we got together with all of them, and we held, as a group, we held conferences almost every year, and a different member of that team would take leadership of the conferences. So there was a first and second annual symposium for rational living at the Forestry Center here in Portland, but we weren't the official host of those, but we were involved. There was an attempt to hire, Rob Boston became our president, and then there was an attempt to hire an executive director, and there's stories that people don't want to repeat about all that, but it didn't work out well. And Rob Boston ended up resigning as president, and Steve Jacobs as vice president took over at that time. Vinnie's nights, actual nights that we go to Vinnie's and have pizza, started in about 2000, May 3rd. And that was just a Sunday night. And apparently assembling the newsletter might have been part of Vinnie's night or part of the Sunday. Okay. Then there was a third secular symposium held near the U.S. Atheists on Foster. And Robert Sanford remembers seeing Don Feller for the first time at one of those conferences. So he found us through those conferences, apparently. And the first annual meeting where we actually tried to figure out, planning and all that kind of stuff, looks like it happened around 2000 with Steve Jacobs. Yes, so that's the next year. So 2001, Vinnie's moved. So we'd been meeting at Vinnie's during that time on Sundays, and Vinnie's had to move. So they closed up in January, and we moved to the Northwest Cultural Center in Northwest Portland. That was not the cave yet, but it was apparently not a great site. There were all kinds of problems with meeting there. On May 12th, we participated in the U.S. Postal Service food drive, May 19th, annual meeting at Friendly House. And yes, that was the very first time this group met in this building, in the garden room. July 21st, the new Vinnie's opened, and we started meeting there again. But it was very crowded, got very crowded very quickly, and it seemed to become clear that that was not going to last too long either. There was apparently some shuffling back to the Northwest Cultural Center at some point, but I can't figure out exactly when that happened. So there was another one of these free thinker symposiums, the fourth one of this little group of secular societies. This one we actually were named the host, and it was at the Greenwood Inn, and Michael Shermer was the speaker. And then that little black dot on the timeline is 9/11. And we appeared in an Oregonian article. Some of our members spoke there. And a lot of people were thinking about religion and what kind of problems it can cause and all that kind of stuff, which apparently ended up in people looking at groups like ours and thinking about joining. I was going to put some more numbers there at the bottom. I was going to try to document the number of members at every point in time, the number of attendees at every point in time, and if there's a little up arrow next to the attendees number, that means that's the maximum that we had seen instead of an average. So there was an event where we had 26 attendees or 28 attendees. That's what that means. And we had 76 members in 2000. And by 2001, we had 84 members. We had one event in 2001, late 2001 or early 2002, where we had 44 attendees. So that's kind of sizable. And it was really squeezing out the second Vinnie's. So we found a new place at the Northwest Academy. Now that's the cave. That was an old theater. It was all black and it was no windows, and it was and that's where many of us found HGP, including me. And Don was one of our greeters at that time at the cave. The first day of reason. So Jerry Gage and I think Pat Burnett were really kind of pushed to get an Oregon Day of Reason officially on the spring solstice, and that was accepted on that date in 2002 by the state of Oregon.
And that was through Carolyn Tomei, who was a representative.
Okay. And yes, Carolyn Tomei was definitely involved in that as well. So at that time, I didn't even know in the cave that we had kind of a childcare thing going on. Some of the parents, and Jeff was helping out with this, were switching off weeks that they would take the kids out on field trips while their parents were in the programs. Yes, so not too many kids. And I hear they went to things like OMSI and community gardens and various things. Okay, and
Yeah, most of the parents stayed in at Northwest Academy, but I like to take the kids on field trips, so I think I was the only one to take them on field trips.
so I'm learning more all the time, as I expected to. Nada, started volunteering to help with coffee and donuts and stuff and getting collections. People started having group lunches out in restaurants. I think somebody mentioned, I think Gretchen suggested some of that. And I remember us meeting at a few different restaurants during that time that ended up, they'd see us come in as this huge group and they'd scramble. And then a few weeks later, they'd have people on staff to kind of help us out when we came in. And then we'd have like a board meeting and we wouldn't show up and they'd be stuck with all these extra staff. And then a month later, they'd be out of business. So it was not wonderful. But it was a lot of fun when we all showed up. Okay, in 2003, there was a program with Jerry Andrus doing magic and debunking stuff. And we had 96 people showed up to that program. And by that time, we were getting up to 121 members or so. So we were growing. And 2004, the board actually approved childcare for 2 hours each Sunday in March of 2004. We had another regional, this was a different regional free thought picnic at Champouille Park, but even though it was regional, I guess we were the only ones that showed up. Arnie Panich took over as MC in 2005 when Robert, I think, moved to Seattle. And we moved the starting time to 10 o'clock. Al Christian started initiating readings before the programs. Pat Burnett addressed the House on the Oregon Day of Reason. On the Day of Reason. She addressed the House of Representatives as the opening convocation or whatever that year. Children's Committee was actually formed in 2005 officially, and in July, we moved to Friendly House. And again, we were growing and we were bursting at the seams. And so here we were meeting downstairs. There was a conference room downstairs and we loved it. And right outside there was the place to the sink and everything, and it all worked out great. It says that Sandra Auld effectively called the first potluck. There were actually effectively potlucks at the Phase and stuff, I think, as well, and probably other places. But she one day suggested people could come and watch a video and bring a potlucks. She was attributed that. Deanna Sewell opened a library in the garden room downstairs, but Deanna has been doing great work with libraries and library displays and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of great work is not going to get in here, and that's one of the things I'm going to mention at the end. Okay, Vinnie's night moved to other places, moved to Old Lair Hill Cafe, apparently to Captain Billy Bang's Pub, which I don't remember at all, but there was a July article in the Northwest Examiner that year, which brought in people, and you'll see that our membership numbers at the bottom have gone from 121 to 130, 149, going to 175 and 223. Our membership is going crazy. So we seem to be doing something right in here. And so that July article brought more attention to us. Culture Vultures formed. I think Bev helped start that. And Nada Sanchez started the small intimate potlucks around that time. The idea being that we just meet at different people's houses with like 4 or 5 people and have a potluck that way instead of trying to meet everybody all at one time. And a bylaws committee was formed in 2006 because we saw things had to be updated. Sue Emmett had a program in early 2007 on leaving the Mormon Church, and that drew 117 people. Now, that's more than we can fit. By the way, along the bottom, you'll see that we had moved. So we were meeting at Friendly House downstairs at some point, and then and at that point we would have an overflow room in the garden room, and we had all this simulcast equipment, which we still have, which would try to transmit things through walls to receivers in the other room where we could play it on the screen, and it didn't work well at all. But in 2007, so Jeff Strang was the president through a lot of this stuff, and John Tillinghast, who was quite a young member, suggested that we start a long-range planning committee and start trying to think of how to deal with all this immense growth that we were getting. So we formed that. And then in June, the AHA conference happened here in Portland, and they asked for a little help, or we asked if we could help them, and they expected to maybe see a couple of people, and they saw 26 people from our group there to help. And so we helped a lot with that conference. I think we might have set up the wine tours and stuff as well. Anyway, so because we're growing like crazy, we saw that Friendly House wasn't going to suit us. We started a building exploration committee. I was vice president on this group, and Strang was the president. And I got involved in long-range planning, and we conducted a big survey of our members, and we still have all the results of that. And I have them with me, and I'll show you a few of them at the very end of this. Okay, 2008, February Outreach Committee and meet. So we started an outreach committee to try to increase our spread. Part of that was creating the meetup. We called it the PAHM at the time, the Portland Area Humanist Meetup, but it's now called HGP Meetup. Easter hats became an HGP thing around that time. November Bylaws Committee was reconstituted because members didn't like the directions that some of the bylaws were going, so we started over again. MC duties apparently became a rotation right about then, instead of just having Arnie all the time. And HGP wins the American Humanist Association Chapter of the Year Award. Since I was president, I can take all the credit for that, except that's not true at all. I was president, but the reason we got the award is because our AHA membership had skyrocketed, and that was mostly because of the AHA conference, and that all happened under Jeff's watch. So Jeff was really the person who that should be awarded to, but they paid to have me, you guys paid to have me go to DC and pick up the award. So that was nice of you. And some people there said, what are you winning this award for? And I said, I don't know. Robert Sanford at the time was in Seattle, but he helped organize a Northwest Free Thought Alliance conference. It happened at PSU. We helped a little bit with that, but maybe not as much help as he would have liked. 125 people attended that. Okay. Then I have nothing here for 2009. Okay. But I'm sure things happened, and you'll start seeing more and more blanks here. Okay, 2010 in May. So we start renting out the garden room every Thursday evening. The outreach committee decides, you know, if we want people to be doing more activities, maybe we should provide a place for them to do it. So we actually just said, the room is there. If you want it, use it. Just sign up first. The main big users were Don Bayham, started Socrates cafes there, just discussion groups, and there were some reading groups that used it. The Long Range Planning Committee came up with a mission statement, which is the one we have now, and the board accepted it. Robert Sanford helped with that, and Bernie Daler helped a lot. In fact, Bernie Daler, I think, is the one who came up with the final wording on that we accepted. In June, the Portland Coalition of Reason came in. The Coalition of Reason was a national thing. It was some secretive guy funding all these groups to do all this announcements. And they called me and they said, Dave, do you want to be the head of the Portland Coalition of Reason? You were recommended by Pat Burnett. And I said, okay. So Sylvia Benner had moved from here to starting CFI by that time, CFI Portland, and we together we kind of led that Portland group. And within HGP, our representatives were Robert Sanford and Sue Nunn represented our meetup. And basically all the groups together were told that if we worked as a group and kind of whatever, they would put up a website that had us all listed, and then they'd put up billboards of some kind that pointed to the website so that people could find all of our groups, and it sounded great. So we did that, and by in November, we had buses going around Portland that had billboards on the side that said, "Are you good without God? Millions are." It pointed to the website pointed to us. People did find us that way. And the website, it still existed until fairly recently, and the website itself is very useful. I think it's a great idea. But the Portland Coalition of Reason has kind of gone away, and the secret funder turned out to be Fred Edwards from AHA, who was the person who called me and asked me if I could join. In June, there was a memorandum of understanding with CFI about holding a film festival. They wanted to hold it, but they wanted more money. And we said, okay, if we can kind of help out a little bit and some credit. And so that's what the memorandum of understanding was. That happened. The film thing happened in October of 2010, film festival. I think that was at Cinema 21 for that year. And and that film festival continued on subsequent years. There was varying amount of monetary support from us and other things, but I was on the first review committee, by the way. And now you're going to notice things. Oh, in February of 2012, we teamed with CFI to hand out birthday cake in Pioneer Square on Darwin's birthday. Yes, Anne was the contact person for that. And that was kind of fun. I at least visited it. I didn't help that much with it. At Friendly House, we moved upstairs to our current digs sometime in 2010 or so. And then nothing happened because it came to be 11:30 last night. And this is all the further I had gone. Now, I started also realizing, wow, there are so many important things that are not getting covered here, and so many important people that are not being noticed. And, you know, I can't even begin to think of this as a complete project. But you can, by the way, look at the membership numbers. So they got up about 210, 220, and then they started declining about 2010 or so. And then they then settled into this area. So they come back down. I did go ahead and fill in some things at the very end here about COVID. So all programs were canceled. We thought maybe temporarily COVID in March 12th of 2020. Then on April 26th, we had our first Zoom meeting. of 2020 with Barrett. And then by 2021, we thought we had set up some sort of a hybrid approach and that we could reopen again. But right then, the next strain of COVID came through, and it turned out that we had opened for only one meeting, and then we had to close. So then we were off to the races with Zoom. We'd had a few Zoom meetings before that, but now we were getting it perfected. And by April, we had a soft reopening, and April 24th, grand reopening of 2022. And things have been this way since. So you don't see anything for 2023, and of course, there's a lot of other stuff missing there. Here's some examples of things that were barely even mentioned. And one of the reasons things weren't mentioned is things that are happening evolutionarily, just changing a little bit at a time and getting better over time, didn't really get highlighted. I mean, things can get proved wonderfully, and there's no mention of them. Humanist counseling stuff wasn't mentioned. Certain aspects of programs like greeters and literature and library name tags. Humanist celebrants, we have humanist celebrants that are involved. Endowments from members who've left us. Library displays that Deanna was setting up. Socrates cafes that Don Boehm was running. Science discussion that Steve Jacobs was doing after the meetings. Humanist discussions that Sheila Pastori was doing. Early birds discussions with David Beam and Carl are still going on. Humanist principles discussions with Steve and Laurent, I think, was helping with those. Website stuff. Dennis Brown was doing the website when I came in, and I kind of took over and moved it into Apple, not modern stuff. And then Val has kind of upgraded everything, making recordings available. We were doing it on CDs and stuff, and now we're doing it all on the web. Books to prisons. Bernie Daler was helping with that. I think Leslie Johnson was involved in that. I think Hank was somehow involved in helping with getting the counseling or prison stuff. Dave Collimer gave several talks on humanism. We've been involved in other groups like Seafarers, etc. There's just so much. Yeah, there's so much that I couldn't cover. And I just wanted to give one slide from the long range planning meeting. So this was from 2007. And we saw the growth happening like crazy. You can think of that left column as being 10 times what it is. So that's 25, 50, 75, 10, et cetera. And I mean, 100. And we've got attendance and we've got membership. And you saw it just going through the roof. And like I said, this graph was made right about here. This wasn't here yet. And we were looking at, if we move out of Friendly House, we're going to have to pay an immense more amount of rent. But we need to do it because we're going to outgrow Friendly House like instantly. We're growing like exponentially in here. A few things happened. One was CFI formed right about that time and like took some of the pressure, if you want to call that, off of us. One of them is that we didn't move out, so we became very crowded. And maybe that's a reason that we stopped growing or something. But basically, right about 2007, things leveled out as far as membership. We ended up like leveling out right about here and then coming back down again instead of going up through the roof like that. So, did we do the right thing? Did we do the wrong thing? Who knows? But that's just a picture of what we were experiencing back in that time when things were growing and we were like, wow, great. This is the AHA conference that happened here in Portland, the first one. So you'll see a few familiar faces, maybe they won't seem familiar. He's sitting right here in the front. That's Del Allen. This is Merle. I don't know Merle. Okay, that's Don Burnett and Pat Burnett and Dick Mace. And you'll see that behind them is is free tickets for this, that stuff that our group was helping with was streetcar stuff. Yes, there's a couple of musicians and I can't quite figure out who they are.
I think it's important to note that I checked about that tie. He tells me that he still has it and it's the only one.
There's Don Burnett and Dell. There's Cumley, Lloyd Cumley and his family from Salem. There's Dell. There's Pat and Don Burnett with their grandkid. There's Dennis Brown, who I believe is on the Zoom today. Yeah, so basically that's what I've got so far. That's all I'm going to present today. I'd like to leave a lot of time for people to ask other people what was really going on, or provide their knowledge of what was really going on. And yeah, so there's lots of people on the call and here in the audience today that were around back then. Of course, there's Pete and Paul Barquette and the daughters and Hank was around, Dell was around. Mike Berchet was around a lot longer than I thought he was. His name started popping up very early on. Dennis Brown, of course. Yeah, so anyway, there's a little hint of what was going on back then. Again, I hope that we can fill this out more, and I hope that people in the audience can speak up. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Dave. That was a beautiful trip down memory lane. Very well organized, very informative today. Thank you. And I'll let you, I assume many of our questions come from the Friendly House. So I'll let me know where the questions are coming from. I'll highlight a couple of things said by the members in chat. Mike Berchet mentions Humanist Northwest, produced by the Barquettes on local public access TV in 2000 and 2001. And Gail Myrna wanted to spotlight Al for organizing the talent shows, which of course are going strong today. So two other things of modern HGP.
Okay, this is not just HGP, it's a little bit about my journey. So I thought this might be interesting. You see the date here. So I was born on a farm in central Michigan in 1939. I enjoyed the farm, especially the tractors. As you know, I'm a tractor collector, many of them. I got quite a few. My grandfather was an officer in the local Methodist church. At the end of the service, I helped him with the collection, and then when dismissed, I, along with my friends, ran down the aisles, downstairs, and out the front door. So we moved off the farm to a neighborhood village when I was 10 years old. At the age of 12, we moved again to another village a few miles away. And it was about this time that my mother mentioned to me something about Catholics praying to candles. I don't know exactly what that was all about, but anyway, that really impressed me, and I decided that those folks were not very rational or scientific thinkers. So I started in the 8th grade in this new community. Starting the first day of school, I spent every noon hour to the end of December in the detention hall because of my behavior. So I was not the best behaved kid. Best friend attended the Methodist church, and he invited me to go along and sing in the choir. We were not well behaved. We drove the choir corrector pretty crazy. Anyway, when I was a freshman in high school, I was in the barbershop, and this turned out to be a kind of a turning point in my life. That's why I'm bringing it up. It's very important. So anyway, the barber and I were in the barbershop alone, and he asked me, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I told him I didn't have any idea. And he said, well, you should take some science and math in high school because those are good preparatory courses. And for some reason, you know, your parents don't always have the best influence. Somebody just making a comment can oftentimes make a real impression upon an individual. And this is exactly what happened. As I progressed through high school, I became I took his advice. In the freshman year or the sophomore year in high school, I signed up for all the academic courses rather than monkeying around. So that started my academic career. And so I continued on. Whoops, let's back up here. As I progressed through high school, I became a better and better student. So I participated in all the sports. I became very particular about my dress, pink pants and that sort of thing. At the time, that was, anybody remember that? Pink pants? Yeah, pink shirt, pink pants. I became very particular about my dress. As a senior, I was the senior class student council representative. So I started to get involved. I was asked to coach the elementary school basketball team. And when I graduated, my best friend and I took the naval electronics exam. He passed, I didn't. So I went, he went to the Navy. And midsummer, I went to Florida with another friend to bask in the sun, returned home in mid-August with no plans on what to do after graduation. So my father, sister, and husband liked to play cards. Our family was invited for a Sunday afternoon barbecue and cards. My cousin, who was just a few months younger than I, had been accepted at a school called Ferris Institute. And my aunt got me in the kitchen, and she really put the pressure on me to go to college. So on the way home, my parents and I talked about me going to college. And the next morning I visited the school principal and asked him if he had an application to go to Ferris, where my cousin had been accepted. And I got the application. He happened to have one. So I took that home and filled it out. And on Tuesday, I took it up. He signed the application. I went home, called the registrar at Ferris, made an appointment for Wednesday, got in my car and drove up to Ferris, talked with the person at Ferris, and let's see. I drove 2 hours to college, saw the register. 10 days later, I was at Ferris attending the university. So I promised myself that I would not flunk out of school because I had not been the best student, you know. So 2 very important days in my life. 1, the barber, and 2, my aunt, which those 2 people made my life. As a junior, I took world history in college, and there was a section on French humanists in the 1700s. So that was my first knowledge of humanism. In the same textbook, there was a section on the popes, their illegitimate children, and some of their interesting activities. Real history. So at the same year, a young, attractive lady from my hometown was going to the same college and asked for a ride back and forth, and I agreed. She was Catholic. During our rides, the topic of religion would come up. And I told her about the Pope and all that sort of thing, and she didn't like that very well. So I graduated from Ferris and became a teacher in Michigan for 4 years, then I was at a summer workshop and found out about the overseas program teaching for the Army, children of the Army, Department of Defense schools. So I spent 6 years teaching, and I got married in 1970. I met Carol Lee while I was there in Germany. Disenchanted with teaching, I left in 1971, enrolled in optometry school in Forest Grove, graduated in 1975, and took a position with Kaiser Permanente in Vancouver. We had a house in Forest Grove, so I drove every day from Forest Grove to Vancouver. And one morning on about 1978, on Highway 26 at about 185th west of Portland, I heard a radio announcement by Dana Andrews. Anybody remember that guy? Yeah, good. Anyway, it's a turning point. Well, he was an actor, had made films and so forth. He was an American film actor. He was one of Hollywood's major stars in the 40s and continued acting through generally in less prestigious roles in the 80s. At this time, the radio stations were required to give a public service organization equal airtime. He spoke about the American Humanist Association, and I noted the information and joined AHA. I received an invitation to a humanist event from Lester Kirkendall, and this is an article on Lester, and he's already been mentioned. So at the Lester formed had a meeting of local people in the area, and he set up this conference out in Beaverton, and he rented this very large room at a motel for this meeting. And so I attended the meeting, and Fred Edwards had just come from Seattle doing a presentation on evolution. And as we had the meeting, there were 5 or 6 people coming with Bibles to save us. And so Fred Edwards and Lester took care of that problem, and Fred Edwards then went ahead and did his presentation. So that was really my beginning of being in humanism. See what else I have here. Oh, a couple letters from I think who else was at that meeting? One of our members here, and I can't. Pardon? Herb Dirksen. That's who it is. He was at that meeting. I don't remember him, but he said he was there. So anyway, after our guests left, the show went on. There were about 6 of us, as I remember. This was my first humanist meeting. There was a group of people here in Portland that joined the AHA and had occasional picnics during the summers. Their names were Humanists of Portland, Vancouver metro area, and they produced a newsletter. I attended some of the picnics, but didn't really know anyone. And I think in 1992, we had, I didn't check this with Dave, but is that when we had the conference here, Dave, 92? Yeah, Kurt Vonnegut was Humanist of the Year and spoke. And my son has Kurt Vonnegut's name tag from that conference. So that was very interesting. I don't know what else I have. Oh. I was born in Michigan and returned to visit every couple of years. And our way back in '83, Carolee, my wife, wanted to stop in Madison, Wisconsin to see the Unitarian church designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. We found the church. It was open, and Carolee picked up several pieces of literature. The literature sounded like what we were interested in. So when we returned home, Carolee contacted the local UU group in Vancouver. They had taken the summer off, as all good UUs do, and their first meeting was a hike at Silver Falls State Park. This sounded like a group we wanted to join. So we joined and became very involved. I became president of the UU group in Vancouver in '82. Carolee was the RE director. In mid to late '80s, Lester Hayes, a member of the congregation, held a Saturday morning humanist workshop at the UU Fellowship, and I attended. This was where I really got introduced to humanism. While I was president, we hired a minister who was basically a humanist, but never revealed that directly. His son, my son, and another young man were best friends and still are today. He left in about 1994, and a new minister came in. I was not happy with the new minister. too much church. Carolee wanted to go to the Christmas program, and I finally relented and went. There was so much praying and holding hands for me, so I walked out. I immediately became more involved in the humanist efforts in Portland. So Mary Gage was president at the time, but Jerry was taking over as I became involved. At the time, it was difficult to get people to run for the board, contrary to today. So I enjoyed the board. So I joined the board as the treasurer. The first thing I did was to put all the financial records on Quicken so we could have a better analysis of our income and spending. I wanted the humanist movement to become a recognized organization in the greater Portland area. Early in 1998, I expressed my desires to the board. They were not in favor, as no one wants to meet on Sunday morning. I disagreed. People have been meeting on Sunday morning for services for centuries. So Jerry agreed to a trial period. Jerry Gage was president. So I suggested to the board that they let me have a trial period starting 5 April 98 and ending in May. We would reevaluate the proposal at the time of May. They finally agreed. When May arrived, they definitely wanted to continue right through the summer, and we have been meeting every Sunday since Sunday morning since that first morning. Where to meet? The board meetings were already being held at Pizza place known as Vinny's across from PCC out on Killingsworth. I asked Pete if he would meet there on Sunday mornings, and he agreed. My idea was to have groups of 4 around tables and let them talk about whatever they had on their minds. It would be a place where humans could talk to humanists. I wanted good food for a good breakfast. I brought granola, whole wheat cereals, German bread, jams, jellies, hot chocolate bars, milk, juice, and pasties. This worked for about 4 meetings. Peter came to me and said the group really just wanted coffee and donuts. I was not happy about. I relented. I had recently seen this movie, Good Will Hunting. Is that the name of the movie? I wanted a thought-provoking phrase up at the first meeting, so I picked, how do you like them apples? To me, it was open-ended and thought-provoking. Unfortunately, Fred Moser found an error in the spelling, and he made a big deal about me not spelling things correctly. If any of you remember Fred, he was a unique person. So the first attendees, Gage, Pete Barquette, Dick Mace, Fred Moser, myself, Herb, Klaus, and some other people. To give the meetings more of a breakfast-like atmosphere, I went to the yardage store over by Mall 205 and bought blue and white checkered yardage. I knew a lady that did sewing and asked her to make the material into tablecloths. We still see one around occasionally. And we still have one around. I don't know how many we had. I think I had 6 made. I knew a lady that did, I had napkins made as well from the scraps. She had just gotten into computer-driven sewing machines and was able to make the logos on the tablecloths and on my shirt. So some of you have seen that shirt. I soon became apparent that there would need to be some kind of program. So I thought Corliss Lamont's book, The Philosophy of Humanism, would be a good starter. That lasted about 3 sessions, and folks soon got tired of that. So then I started preparing presentations and looking for speakers. John Kovash gave a presentation on alternative high school class about humanism. One of the students went home and told her mother about the philosophy, and the mother looked us up. And I can't remember her name now. Anyway, I think she was the first woman member to attend the meetings. Don and Pat Burnett came. Pete decided that he needed a better place to make pizzas, so he moved into a new place about 2 blocks east of the original Vinny's. When the time came to move, Pete packed everything up on Saturday night. And Sunday after the HGP meeting, we all pitched in and carried boxes of stuff to Pete's storage area so he could move stuff in as soon as the new place was ready. Even Fred carried a box to the storage area. I have a picture of that. The new building had a dining hall and worked much better than the old building. By then, we were having a regular stream of speakers. One morning, the tall, attractive lady came to the meeting and she had a foreign accent. Her name was Sylvia Benner. The second lady to attend, as I recall, she later took over as program person. I haven't seen her in quite a while. I don't know. She got very involved in some of the other programs in town. We soon outgrew Vinnie's dining room. In addition, members wanted something more centrally located downtown. I think we moved to the cultural center. And then eventually there was a large pillar. There was a large pillar in the middle of that room. And for some reason, I associate that pillar with Robert. I think that was maybe the first time I met him. One morning, Jerry's friend showed up. He was a very outgoing person, seemed experienced and interested in the organization. He'd been a teacher, an instructor, and held several other types of jobs. His name was Robert. So, whoops, here. I don't know how much time we have here, but
Yeah,
Robert's son attended the Northwest Academy, located at 1130 Southwest Main Street, kitty corner from the UU Church. Robert made arrangements for us to meet there in the auditorium. Another name for that place popped up, huh? Many events took place while we met there. My responsibilities were treasurer, program chair, MC. I bought the PA system that we had then, board member, membership chair. A lady started attending along with her husband. She was attractive, outgoing, seemed very intelligent, always smiled and interested in the welfare of HGP. Husband was rather quiet and reserved. So I decided to ask her to help me with the programs. Her name was, pardon? Helen? No. Carol Kellogg. A rather quiet young gentleman started showing up. He seemed rather serious, and I thought he might needed a job to do so that he would feel part of the group. So I asked him if he would take care of the PA system. He agreed to do that. His name is Jeff Strang. One morning after Jeff was around for when he first started coming, I went over to him and I said, are you really serious about staying in the group? And Jeff agreed that he was very serious about staying in the group. So he lived up to that. He's still around. I was the MC as well. And Robert, in his very relaxed and casual way, came to me one day and basically said, "You are not a very good MC. So let me do it." So who was I to argue with someone so confident as Robert? In fact, he was much better than I was, so it turned out just fine. Sometime during this period, I recall a couple showed up who seemed very interested in the group. We became acquainted and time went on, and so I asked the fellow if he would be in charge of the membership. He agreed in his name. I could be, I can't remember. I did this program a long time ago, so I just happened to run across it. I wanted HGP to become a care group like other social groups, and so I came up with the name Humanist Helpers, but never pursued it. I think the person who picked it up was Jeff. Since then, there have been many people involved in the Humanist Helpers effort, and thanks to them all. Getting to know HGP members. So I prepared this for another presentation, so I don't know what all, I think I'm finished.